a new interface. So before you got a little block up window, now you're going to get a bar that says this meeting is being recorded. It's going to let you choose to leave or do okay, and you don't have that large disclaimer anymore. So that's also to give you a heads up. So welcome everyone to another in our workshop series, Practical and Accessible. And today we're going to be talking about images. So imagine this is the title of our presentation. And so we're going to walk through, if you haven't been to one of these before, the deal is this. We would like to present to you how to use a tool or feature or create something that you may use in your daily practices. And we're going to go over it from a practical standpoint of some information about it, best practices, how to do something more effective or efficiently organizationally, if it's a business practice or a daily teaching practice. And then we're going to also just infuse it with accessibility. So that way, this is a combo of how do we do things that we do on a daily basis, but just automatically incorporate accessibility into it. So we're going to talk about images today. And so welcome to Imagine This, part of the Practical and Accessible series. So for today's workshop, we break this up into a couple sections. And so what we're going to do is we're going to cover image basics, things to consider when you are choosing images to display for flyers, posters, academic content, course materials, anything that you want to create. We're just going to talk about some basics about actual images. We're going to then jump into talking about where you source your images and the things that you can take into consideration to find appropriate, both in terms of accessibility, but also around legal and any other considerations. So we're also going to do some basic web searches. We're going to do a little practice Q&A. And if you're not already familiar, we do stop and do polls every once in a while. And sometimes we do like a little bit of a play session. So you're going to be able to work on something that we're bringing up. Then we're going to talk about AI for images, talk about how AI could be used for generating images. So we talked about how to source images and then also how you could generate them if that's an interest of yours. Then we're going to talk about adding images and what are the considerations when you are putting images into that actual print document or multimedia document that you want to create. We're going to revisit by talking about alternative text, which is something we normally do cover, but we also want to just go over that as a refresher from the other previous sessions. And then we're going to talk about the all-important distribution of what happens when you've completed it, you made all those steps, and then what do you do to actually get it out there, and what are some tips and tricks to do that? So without any further ado, as a reminder, you can always feel free to put your questions in the chat. We are monitoring the chat. We'll be able to answer it. But if you feel like going off the mic or unmuting yourself and speaking on the mic, go ahead and interrupt us. We're okay with that. That's not a big issue for us. So if you got a question immediately, feel free to ask, or you can just use the chat and we'll come back to you. So the first thing that I'm going to cover, and since I'm not presenting it, it actually just says part of that, which is click a subtitle. We're just going to talk about image basics. So there are a couple of things that you want to consider when you are choosing images for print or for distribution, course material kind of things. So the first thing we're going to talk about here is going to be what we call purpose. And it's not porpoise, it's purpose. So understand the purpose of a poster or flyer. Is it advertising something like an office or a service or an event? If you know the purpose, what you will do, that's going to help you select appropriate images. Although some people like to throw curveballs and create evocative images that stray from the topic, most audiences will focus on that and not your message and event. So one of the biggest rules about choosing images is to really try to incorporate or relate the image to the event, materials, or whatever you're trying to create. The next thing that you want to consider is going to be image format. And we're going to cover three things here. We're going to talk about size, we're going to talk about file formats, and we're going to talk about resolution. Now, Marisha, at the end of the presentation, is going to talk about the website page that we have on the CODL website, but this is going to have more than these topics as advice, but we're just going to cover these three basic ones for the purpose of this presentation, but there'll be more tips and advice on the site. The first thing that you want to do is to think about size. So what is the size of your promotion? Flyer, postcards? Are they posters? Is this something that's going on the web? What is the materials that you're going to be using? And you want to select an image where the dimensions fit the available space. So that you're not going to overwhelm the text or any other required images. So if you have to use the stick logo, if you have to do anything about sponsors, you want to take all of the images into consideration. But if you're looking for something to jazz up the picture, you don't want that to become the primary focus. You want that to have a balanced focus with the materials. And so if you look on the screen, there is a difference between having text that, for example, is very large, but a very small image, versus something that may be very large and very small text, and then having something where it's just right. So it's kind of like Goldilocks and the Three Bears, not too small, not too big, but just kind of right, and it balances out. So you want to choose images that are going to be appropriate, but also don't detract from the message you're trying to send. Next thing we're going to talk about are file types. And this is just for information because most people don't actually know what these are. They just hear the phrases. So the first one we're going to talk about is going to be called a PNG, which is called a portable network graphic. That's what PNG stands for. Now, PNGs are larger files. They allow you to have transparent backgrounds. So if you'll notice that the stick logo sometimes doesn't have the borders and the phrasing, that's because it's usually saved as a PNG. So it allows you to place things on an image without worrying about the white background or whatever the background the picture was taken in or the image was created. And it's predominantly used for graphics. It's a very popular thing on high-end graphics. Its equal or partner is going to be JPEGs, and those are probably historically the older of the two. And this is going to actually be also another portable graphic exchange. And this is a smaller file. It takes less time to load up, and it's often used for photos because it has less storage, either on cameras, on cell phones, or also for load time on websites. So if you, for example, are building a website out, you'll often hear people recommend that you want to use a JPEG image because it's a smaller file that will load faster on a device versus a PNG, which might be used more for print or layout or things where you need higher quality and you need to be able to manipulate the background and manipulate the image a little bit better. The next two that I'm going to talk about are not necessarily going to be used for posters or print material, but they are popular and people often ask about them. The first one is going to be called a GIF or GIF, as the person who came up with the term calls it, but I say there's a G in it, so it's a GIF. So because GIFs are GIFs. So these are actually best for electronic communication. They are almost always animation of some form. A GIF is generally a small pocket, a little piece of multimedia animation that usually cycles and repeats over and over again. Usually used in social media, but it can be used in educational context, but it is not very good for static documents like posters, flyers, those kind of things. The next thing is going to be a meme. And just wanted to clarify that a meme is actually not a file type. A meme is actually where you take an image or a video and then you place text upon it for either commentary or for humor, but you're making some kind of statement with the image that you're applying it to. Now, a meme is often just generated as in a format of either a PNG or a JPEG file, but it is not itself its own file type. So the other reason that I bring this up is because memes are usually not prepared to be accessible. They don't explain the text on the image, and they often are context specific. So when you hear the phrase meme, just to let you know, that is not a file type. That is not an animation or something you would put on a flyer. It is actually a document in itself, which is usually an image or a video that's playing on it. So it also could not be accessible. So we want to point that out too. And the next thing that I'm going to just briefly talk about is going to be resolution. So in the simplest terms, it's the amount of the amount of detail that an image holds. Often you're going to hear phrases like an image has a certain amount of pixels or dots per inch or DPI. And this is just telling you the measurement of how big that item can be expanded out to. So the average document has an image with a resolution of 300 dots per inch. Now that means that it can be expanded out the higher the number, the greater and bigger it can be expanded out. So if something was 1800 DPI, it could be expanded out. So say you needed a full giant poster, you would want to use something with a higher resolution. But please know that something with a higher resolution often also is a bigger file. So you're storing bigger files on your desktop or your computer, and they also take longer to load when they're put on websites. You'll know this usually when you download an image and you click on it and it makes it big on your own laptop screen. That means you've downloaded a really big file, and that's the biggest it can be, and then you'll have to remeasure it. Now, for the most part, there are ways to check what the image resolution is by just usually clicking on the image itself or selecting the image and then right-clicking Info. However, what I usually say to just people is just be very conscientious in terms of resolution. You want to have something that is not blurry and doesn't look granular when printed out. So that's kind of the basic gist of what you want to pay attention to with resolution, is that the image should be clearer, that when it's photocopied or printed, you don't lose a lot of the detail of the intent of the image. So this image on the screen has been altered where I've taken away some of the contrast and those kind of things. The one image actually is very gray, it is blurry, and if it was printed out, it would probably just be a massive gray block. Whereas the additional image is very clear. It very much is that it's the Empire State Building, and that you can have some distinction. And when printed or photocopied, it would be able to, you discern that as the size of the building. Then the last thing that we're going to talk about is going to be legal considerations. So you want to make sure that you have the right to use the images that you select. You want to avoid copyright infringement by using images that are either in the public domain, licensed for commercial use, attribution, or obtained through proper permissions. So you want to make sure that it exists in the public domain, that you can use it freely. You want to make sure that it's on a website, and we're going to cover that in a minute, that you have permission to alter or use it, or you have to attribute the author or whatever they're asking you to do. They're going to go over that. And or that you've actually written to the author or the creator of the content, and you've asked for particular permission for this. Now, there also, since we're talking in an educational environment, there is fair use. And so when you are using things in academic context, you have a little bit of leeway. However, this is also just to cover that there are things that posters, flyers, anything that goes out for public distribution, you really don't want to put things on there that you don't have permission for. So we're also talking about when you're doing flyers and things like that as well. You want to just be aware that you have the ability to use that content and that material. And that's going to have us go ahead and round up our considerations. So as I said before, we're going to look at the purpose. We're going to look at the format between the size and the type and the resolution. And then you just always want to be very considerate of ownership. Just like for you having the ability to teach your own classes, and you want respect for what you create and generate and get proper citation and recognition, so do people who create content on the web. So that's the legal considerations to be that. So we usually stop, we take a break, and just to make sure where we're at in the presentation, we're going to introduce a poll. So Marisha, if you could go ahead and put that up. So I'm going to stop sharing for a second.
So the poll should have gone up. There are 2 questions to the poll. So you can go ahead and respond. So the first question is, which of the following are the best image types of static materials like posters, flyers, or print materials? Check all that apply. And then the second question asks about your comfort with the content that we've just covered.
No worries if you came in late. And as an FYI, we always record these, so you're going to be able to come back and review afterwards. Thanks for letting us know.
So Kyle, I think we're at 5 responses out of 8 people, but I know some people were coming in late, so and I see 6 responses. So I don't know if you want to summarize those and then.
Sure. And then Nancy says she didn't get the poll. Does it jump up for Nancy?
Oh, it should have popped up. So Nancy, the 2 questions were, which of the following are the best image types of static materials like posters, flyers, or print materials? And the options were JPEG, PNG, GIF, and memes. And then the second question was, I understand the considerations for choosing an image for promotional materials or course content, flyers, presentations, posters, etc. And
Okay.
it looks like, yeah, go ahead.
Yep. So it sounds like most of you understood that the JPEG and the PNG, those are actually when you see those file types, and they'll usually be like cats.jpg, cats.png, that those are actually the best for materials, whether course materials or printed, but they're the best for printed materials. And then also just to know that GIFs and memes are actually not the best for static materials like posters and flyers because they are meant for online or digital communication. And then understanding the considerations there. Okay, so a handful of you feel like 4, 5, 3. That's kind of clear. That's okay. This was also relatively quick information given to you, and that this is also going to be covered on the website page as well. And then for the one person who is who stated that they were a little bit lost, always know that you can interrupt, ask questions, but also that we can meet with you at any time afterwards to go over any of this and follow up with you, as well as check out the website as well. So thank you all for taking that the time for us. Let us know how that's going. So those are going to be kind of practical things that you hear that you're not sure what you're going to do, what you do with them when you're creating images. But we're going to move on to talking about image sources. So let me share my screen again. Share. Okay. All right. So the next piece is going to be image sources. So where do you find image? So let's take a couple minutes to talk about where you would find images for flyers. Now, this is going to be prepare yourself for a little bit of practice. We're going to take some breaks in a few moments, but I'm going to cover 2 ways that you can search for what Marisha and I have talked about being probably the best way to find images on the web that are more likely to be accessible and also will be responsible for giving credit and proper for distribution. The first thing is that most of you are probably familiar with using the Google search, and it is a very popular tool. It lets you find all sorts of pictures and images on the web, and you can always enter keywords or descriptions, and then Google will show you the results related to your search. And it's helpful for you to discover the various resources that you have available to you. But the one thing that we do want to make sure that you are aware of is that upon doing a Google search, and I'll go over this live with you, but I'm just going to show you the static one, is that there is a way to actually select usage rights where there is what's called a Creative Commons license. Creative Commons in a second, I'll talk about that, but Creative Commons is going to give you the option to be able to share materials that have been automatically distributed with some type of attribution that you can use, alter, edit with or without permission. And there's a series of those, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So it saves time in finding images for yourself, but it also reduces any legal complications or anything where you were or were not supposed to be able to use that. Now I'm going to make a quick adjustment to my screen really quick. Move this here because I need a little bit more landscape. Okay. So the next thing that we have here is going to be like that is Creative Commons. Now, you might be asking, what is Creative Commons? So it is a way for you to find work that people have shared with you, was shared on the internet, photos, music, writing, while protecting their own content creation rights. It offers a set of licenses that creators can choose from, allowing them to specify how others can use their work, whether it's to use for free, whether they have to do attribution, or it's solely for non-commercial purposes. People can also choose to allow for commercial purpose, and there's also different ways that you can reach out to people if that is the case. The organization's goal is to promote an open and collaborative sharing and reusing of creative content on the internet, but also giving credit to the creators who create it. The first thing to show you the screen is that to search on Creative Commons, you can use various popular other websites like Flickr, Pixabay, Wikimedia Commons, or the Creative Commons search itself. So various other websites that are known for producing images or having images that you can look for on their website, they also have filters that let you determine what the Creative Commons license. So Creative Commons has created the licensing to say share, share alike, all of those things, and that each of the photo sharing websites will let you select by what you're looking to create. So I want to go ahead and actually stop and share my screen. I'm going to stop and share my browser for a second. And we will go through the first thing. How did you all do this without two screens during the pandemic? I would just like to say. Okay, so if I have shared, all right, so I am sharing my Chrome window, and I am going to go ahead and I want to search. So I did this. I searched for cats. Now, when you traditionally search for something, you're going to get a whole return of a variety of things, usually a general Google definition. You're going to get something from one of the most popular resources. If you're not familiar with Google searches, almost always the ones that are the most popular are going to be at the top, and then all of the rest of the pages go below. When you search for something that's an image, you go to where it says cats, and then below the search term, you're going to have an option to find videos, images, perspectives, photos for sale, games, hypoallergenic, common phrases that come up with cats. If you select the button that selects images, you're going to see only images, and it's going to filter out everything else. When you come to that images section, in the middle of the menu bar, you're going to see images, videos, books, news, more, but you're going to see a feature called tools. When you select on the tools pull down, you're going to get another menu. Sorry, there's a lot of menus. And this is where you're going to see the word usage rights. This is going to let you to look for Creative Commons licensed images or images that you will be using for commercial and other licenses. So if you're looking for Creative Commons license, this means that the content creators actually designated what they wanted their content to be created for. Almost always is some form of share alike, letting people be able to take the image as it is, being allowed to take the image and alter it, or being able to alter it however they want to, and also sell that image after the fact. Commercial and other licenses would be public websites that are company websites that actually sell images to you if you're looking to purchase an image and automatically get the rights to that image to be able to use. So if I selected on Creative Commons licenses, this would actually scan through and find me where my users actually selected the Creative Commons license, and you'll notice it on there. So you'll start to see things where it says licensable. And so as you go through this, you'll find an image. And if I come to Flickr, I'll have here where I can then just go there and it'll give me the license details. So if I select on that, it's going to tell me that this person, it's an older image. it's going to tell me that it's attributed that you can share alike. And then it's going to give me the I am free to share it and I am free to adapt it, and that I do need to give attribution or give credit to the person, and that also I have to, if I share this, I have to share it under the same rights that the original user created it as. So that's going to be just a general, if you're doing a Google search, that's how you would search for images. And I need my menu bar back. 1 second. So if you were searching for that, that would be how you would be able to find Creative Commons licenses. So you'll search for the word, you're going to select on images, and then under images, you're going to see usage rights. And when you do that, under that, you can select Creative Commons, and that's going to let you be able to know what you're going to be able to use. Now, the other way that you can search for items is to actually go to the Creative Commons search portal. And this one, I'm going to give you in the link in the chat. So let me just open that up and put that right there. And so this website is going to be it's actually on the Creative Commons website. It's going to actually show you all of the searches and what resources it's using: Google Images, Flickr, SoundCloud, all of those things. Now, if I want to use Creative Commons, I can do the same thing here. I can go ahead and do cats and do search. And when I do that, what's going to happen is it's going to give me an interface. It's going to say cats. It's going to say images. It also gives me audio if I want audio. And I have no idea what that's going to be, I'm assuming. But what'll happen is that you will see here when you select over the image, it's going to give you at the bottom a little attribution code that's going to tell you what you are allowed to do with this image. If you know that you want to just be able to modify or adapt an image or play with one, if you want an image that you know is in the public domain, that you don't have to provide any designation to, what you can do is on the right-hand side, you're going to get a series of filters. And you can turn the filter on by making adjustments. So if I only wanted something in the public domain, it would go ahead and just filter it out and then give me things that are open in the public domain where I don't have to give attribution. And then I can go ahead and do that, or I can unselect that and come over here. And then I will have images where I'm going to be able to click on them and find out what the attribution that is available to me is. So by the selection. If I'm on the website, I can click on an image, select the image. When I scroll on the image, I can go, oh, this is a cat. The cat is on a pavement of some form, sitting, facing me. And when I'm on the Creative Commons search, what's going to happen is it says always for every image gives me instructions how to use. And it is not actually hosting the image. It's a search function that is going to take you to another website where this image is hosted. The content creator has used the Creative Commons attribution or sharing license. So that's why this is showing up here. And you're going to go to the website that it is located, and then you can use it. On the Creative Commons license, it will always have a little generator that if you're wanting to give attribution, it will give you the attribution in rich text. So this way, anyone who has this, if you wanted to put this in a PowerPoint presentation or on materials, you could go ahead and select that. HTML, if you're going to put it on a website, or if you just need the actual website that you've gotten this image from, it will show that to you as well. To gather the image, there's a button that usually says get this image, and you will click on the image that it is. It will take you to the website, in this case, Flickr, and then you will look on the page. You will look for a designation of being able to download it. On Flickr, it's always going to be to the far right-hand side of the page where you're going to see a little download button. The download button is always a downward facing arrow with a line underneath it. So that's the indicator that you're going to be able to download this folder, and then you're going to be able to have that folder on the desktop of your computer. So that was a lot of stuff, I understand. But what I would, any questions about that so far? Okay. If you do, go ahead and put in the chat, but this is where we're going to pause and I'm going to say that we're going to do, so if I go through this, is that after finding your Creative Commons license, you want to make sure you find the right license usage, and then you want to download it. One of the other pieces of advice before I forget is you want to provide an accurate and simple title for your image, because sometimes the website does not provide you an image, an explanation of the image that is available. So when you are all set, we're going to go ahead and we're going to take a moment and we're going to do a little practice or playtime. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the URL for the Creative Commons search in the search again, in the chat again. And what we would like you to do just for a couple minutes is to just click on the link if available and go to the Creative Commons license main search page. So I will share that window again with you. And just find something that you might look up, type something in, doesn't have to be cats, but it can be something related to your job or something. If you are in charge of graduation, you could go ahead and take a look and search and see what images come up for graduation and then kind of play around with that. And you'll notice here, one of my images that I looked up for graduation was right here. And I'm able to find the various different licenses, whether it's on the public domain, which lets me share that, or do I have to give credit? Do I have to give credit and I'm allowed to alter it? Am I allowed to give credit, alter it, and then adapt it and change it and make it my own? And then if I do anything, I have to actually say that everyone can do the same, which is called share alike. So I'm going to pause and I'm going to ask people. So it is 12:36. We will come back at 12:38, and I'm going to ask people what their thoughts were about doing a really quick search using the Creative Commons.
And Kyle, are we doing this individually or are we doing the breakout rooms?
I was going to let this be done individually.
Great.
So just let people pick and choose what kind of images they want. And if people are having any problems, you can unmute your mic or put your chat on. And I feel like I should have a little like clock tick.
And also just a quick reminder that we are going until 3:30 today. So this is a 90-minute workshop. I know a lot of our workshops are 60 minutes. So if you're wondering, when are we done? We're not quite done yet. You have us a little bit longer.
Okay, so it is 2:38. I'm going to ask for anyone. I'm not going to point anyone out, but if someone could go ahead and just share what their experience so far has been, testing it out, playing with it. If a brave soul would come off the mute and say something.
I was searching for, healthcare images, but I have to say the licensing still confuses the heck out of me.
Okay. Yep. And definitely we can do a little bit more in depth in that. For just simple purposes. So the Creative Commons license, what it allows you to do as a user is to know someone generated content for you, and they're going to let you know how you can use it. And it basically is, am I allowed to use this freely and I just have to give them credit? Do I have to use it and I'm allowed to edit it as well? So some people will share an image and say, go ahead and use it, but you can't change it. Some people will say, go ahead and use an image and feel free to alter it, edit it, whatever. Then also, I want you to give me credit. Just say on your image, on your PowerPoint, on your present that Tim Smith created it. So that way you can take the image and say Tim created it and I can't alter it. Tim made an image and I created it and I'm allowed to alter it, but Tim still let me use it. And then I can also, if Tim wants, can never say this is my image. I can never say I altered it. I have to say, just like Tim did, you can have this image. It's now Tim's and my alteration to it. And I have to use the same criteria. I have to let people freely use it. And I have to let people be able to share it and put it out there, but they all have to give credit. So it's a little bit tricky in terms of trying to figure it all out, but it's basically thinking about all the steps of when you create something, do you want people to not fix it at all, not change it? Do you want them to change it? And if they're going to change it, how do they give you credit for it? Things in the public domain, like many people recently heard, like Mickey Mouse. So it's actually not Mickey Mouse, it's actually Steamboat Willie is now in the public domain because after a certain amount of years, things go out into and they are no longer copyrighted. And there's various nuances to that. One little heads up, the United States copyright isn't the same as the rest of the world and the rest of the countries. So 1984, for example, I don't know if it even today was not in the US, is not under the public domain in the United States, but it is in other countries. So that also varies there. So hopefully that's a little bit helpful, Melissa.
And Kyle, I just wanted to add one more of the Creative Commons licenses is the non-commercial.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so that is one to keep an eye on. So it means that the image can't be used for a profit. And generally within teaching at a public institution, we're fine with using images that have the non-commercial license. But if you're incorporating anything that then may go into print, and even if it's just a print shop that's printing a course back, then that you can't use non-commercial attributed images for that because the print shop is making money off of materials created with that image.
Thanks, Marisha. Okay, so I would encourage people to, again, play around. We talked a little bit about the various things you do when you consider it, but then also when you're exploring and searching on the web, just to be aware of that. Jamie?
Just to follow up on Marisha's point, that would that include the stick print shop? If they're putting together a course packet for you?
I think that would fall squarely into a very gray area because I don't know what the funding structure of the print shop is. I'm guessing that if it functions within the public entity of STIC, which is a non-for-profit organization, then it would be fine. But sometimes on campuses, print shops are actually managed by another organization that is a for-profit organization. So it's just finding the nuance of that. And so when in doubt, just look for things that don't have that non-commercial restriction.
Yeah, I think that the other thing is that sometimes people will use images on a packet that down the road they distribute out and they charge a certain amount of money. That's where that comes into play, is that if you were to create, most people will put out onto the web something that they want to share and have people, we talk about open educational resources. You're sharing an open educational resource, not expecting any profit back, but sometimes people will create something and then want to make a profit from it. That's where the non-commercial license comes in, whether it's educational material or not.
All right, so I think we're ready to go on to our next section.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm gonna now move on to AI for images. So AI, also known as artificial intelligence, has been in the news and been talked about much more in the last year and a half than it has been before, even though it's been around for decades. because in the last year and a half, we've seen what is called large language models coming out on the market. So large language models like ChatGPT that take information that they've gathered from various sources and then use predictive technology to generate primarily text. But there are also large language model type tools that generate images. So I have two examples of images that were generated. One was created with Copilot with Bing, and the other one was created with DALL-E, which is an open AI tool. The interesting thing is that Bing actually incorporates DALL-E into its search. And so even though you're searching in Bing, you're essentially still using the DALL-E tool. I was using DALL-E 2, which is the free version, and I was using the free version of Bing, which actually has access to DALL-E 3. So there are some of these nuances. And the search that I did, the prompt that I did put in was to search for a college campus. And the interesting thing that came out was that with Bing, where that was using DALL-E 3, the image of a college campus was kind of like the quad with a big lawn and then some buildings around it. Whereas the images that I got with DALL-E 2 were kind of these collegiate looking buildings with brick facades. So same prompt, different results. Depending on whether you choose to get a paid license or are using the free license, you may be restricted in terms of the number of images you can generate at a time, the number of images you can generate per week, per month, that sort of thing. But they're definitely great tools if you're looking for an image and you tried Creative Commons or you tried other searches and you're not finding the right thing, or you want to tweak on a thing. So it's definitely something to try to have in your bag of tricks for locating an image that you may want to use. Now, just like Kyle was talking about licensing and attribution, just because a machine generated it doesn't mean that it is something that can be used without attribution. So the STIC library has a great resource for working with AI, working with artificial intelligence, working with finding sources, writing prompts. And the guidance that it provides on citing AI is that in academic work, citation is when you give credit to creators whose ideas or information you have used or referred to. Citation not only let your readers know where an idea came from, but also point them to the original resource where you found the idea so that they can explore it for themselves. So here's the sticking point. When using generative AI, there's no single source to cite, and no one can replicate the exact answer you received later on. Every time you repeat your search, you're going to get slightly different responses because it is using, it's re-predicting based on data. And so every time there's going to be a change in the outcomes that you see. So you do need to cite your sources with the caveat that nobody will be able to exactly replicate what you did. And there is guidance for how to cite AI both in MLA and APA format on the library website. So we've talked a lot about where to get images, how to find images, how to create images with AI. So now we're going to transition to a little bit more of the accessibility content. So how to write alternative text, how to create alternative text for an image. So the first thing that I want to do is I actually want to show you a demo of a screen reader user and the way that he's interacting with some images. So I'm gonna play this video and then I'll pause it and talk about it a little bit.
So I have a couple graphics on this page.
Mark Sutton hands on a MacBook Pro image.
So the first one is well described and uses an alt tag
You are currently on it.
to describe what that graphic is all about. Now we go to the next graphic,
Reader 042116.jpg.
much less useful.
So basically what we're experiencing here is that there's two different images. Visually, they look exactly the same, but one of the images had the alternative text description of Mark Sutton's hands on a keyboard, and the other one, the alternative text was the file name, which was a series of numbers followed by JPEG. So the goal of the alternative text is to provide the screen reader user with information about the image. And if that information is not available, then sometimes information will get pulled in from the file name, or sometimes it does get automatically generated with AI, but then that may not be the information that you actually want about the image. So in writing alternative text, you want to keep it short, but also try to make it as informative as possible. You want to focus on the meaning of the image, and it's going to be context specific. So you may have the same exact image that you're using in two different scenarios, where in one scenario, the image is going to be STCC logo, and in a different scenario, it may be maroon text on white background. So depending on what you want to say about the stick logo is going to be what is conveyed in your alternative text. If you have any cartoons, Kyle talked about memes, charts, that sort of thing, you want to include any of the text that is in that image so that all of the information that is in the image is conveyed to the person interacting with the alternative text. And you don't need to include the words image of in your alternative text, because the screen reader already says that it's an image. So if the type of image is important, so if you want to say that this is an AI generated image, or this is a photograph, or this is an oil painting, then that would be important information. But you don't need to say things like image of. So I know a few people had to head out early, but we do still have a number of you here. And what I want to do is play around a little bit with some images that I'm presenting and the types of alternative text that we could write for the images. So the first one is the porpoise that Kyle had on her first slide, where she was talking about the purpose or the porpoise. So for this image, I could say it's a bluish porpoise on the sea floor. Or I could actually speak more to the pun that Kyle was making with the words purpose and porpoise. In another image that Kyle used, she was showing a screenshot of a menu dropdown for usage rights. And so in this screenshot, we have three different options that you can select from the menu. You can select all, just Creative Commons licenses, or commercial and other licenses. So this and all is currently checked. So this may be the important piece of the image, that you're selecting all as opposed to just the more granular Creative Commons or commercial licenses. So what is the message that you're trying to convey with the screenshot? And now we get to some memes. So we have one of my all-time favorite memes. It says, "Let's eat grandma." And then grandma gets really scared because it seems like there's some cannibals in the room, and she's yelling, "What?" And then it's all good because punctuation saves lives. So it's "let's eat, comma, grandma." And then so it's, "Hey, let's go have supper with grandma," not "let's take a bite out of grandma." So with something like this, you want to include all of the text as well as the purpose. So what are you trying to convey with this? You're trying to convey that this is an image about the importance of punctuation, and that you're making a joke, and that it is important that there's a comma that's been inserted between "let's eat" and grandma. And finally, we sometimes have images that have a specific purpose, like a QR code. So in this instance, I have a QR code that goes to the Wikipedia website. So with alternative text for this QR code, I might specifically say QR code for Wikipedia. I would explore where did that QR code actually go so that the alternative text would convey all of that information. Okay.
Marisha, there is
Yeah.
a question from Nancy. How many
Oh, great.
characters should your description contain? Is there an acceptable average?
Great question. So I have, back when Twitter was still called Twitter, I remember hearing that alt text should be no longer than a Twitter post, which I believe was 140 characters. I have never sat down and counted my characters when I write alt text, but I think of it as a less than a sentence. So a short sentence, a short phrase, sometimes it ends up being a little bit longer. So in describing a meme, it ends up being a little bit longer. So like in that Let's Eat Grandma meme, I actually put in all of the text as well as a little bit of an explanation. If you have something that is much, much longer, requires much more of an elaborate explanation, that's where you would use a caption instead of putting all of that content into alt text, because then it just gets too long. So like if we're looking at infographics or really complex charts, that's where you might want to use a caption rather than just the alt text.
And in some graphics programs like Adobe, it's alt text and then descriptive text or description text. And so the two boxes let you do the difference. So you can have one that shows up as alt text and then the other one that either goes to whatever a caption or an alternative reader would actually pick up.
So this gets us to a little bit of playtime. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you in the chat a link to a Google presentation. So I just put that in the chat that has 4 different images that in some ways follow along with the types of images that I was just describing. And we're going to have 2 breakout rooms. So we're going to have a breakout room that's called room 2 and a breakout room that's called room 3, because when I was setting these up, we had some people that had to jump off. So with those of you who end up in room 2, if you could look at slides 2 and 4, and those of you who end up in room 3, if you could look at slides 1 and 3. And try to type in some alternative text that you think would be appropriate for that image. You can talk to each other in the room, kind of describe it to each other. One of the great tips that I once heard for writing alternative text is if somebody called you on the phone and you needed to describe this content to them, what would you say? So I'm going to go ahead and open up those rooms, and Kyle and I will come and visit you as well. And we're going to take about maybe 5 minutes, maybe a little bit less to work on this activity, and then we'll come back. So you should have gotten the notice to join the room. Nancy, do you need me to? Oh, Nancy went in. Excellent. Okay. Do you want to go visit one room and I'll go visit the other? Because you're on mute, but I think you said sure.
Sure, not a problem.
Okay. Do you want room 2 or room 3?
Doesn't matter to me.
All right. I'm going to go to room 2 and you go to room 3, and then we'll come back at like 3:02.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
All right.
All right, welcome back, everyone. So, the group that I visited was having just the most amazing conversation about slide 2. Can somebody from that group share what you were discussing?
I didn't know if Nancy wanted to say. Nancy actually had the best contribution because we were talking about the image we had was the keyboard. And then at first we were talking about how there were red boxes around certain keys. And then we were talking about what that shortcut was. And then Nancy had a lot to contribute because she couldn't see the image. So she was actually guiding us with how we should write it.
That's like electronic withdrawal for sure. Yeah.
Hold up, Zoom meeting.
Well, this is Nancy. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. In our
How was
group,
it?
Lucy told us that it was the keyboard shortcut for a screenshot. And so we were debating, do we put all of that information in the description? Do we put keyboard shortcut for screenshot? Windows Shift S keys are highlighted in red. Or do we just include part of that information depending on what's already been said in the text of the document? So that's kind of how our conversation evolved.
Yeah, and I was kind of just sitting there as a fly on a wall. It was so amazing to hear the discussion and the conversation. And so, Nancy, I was wondering, since we have you as this wealth of knowledge in the room as a screen reader user, if you could share with us a little bit more about what experiences you've had in terms of images with alternative text.
Well, first of all, thank you for calling me a wealth of knowledge, but I wouldn't go quite that far. But thank you. I appreciate when it's there. I like when there is a little bit of description. Maybe I'm unique in that because I once could see. So I can draw upon visual recall so that if you tell me something's highlighted in red, I appreciate that because in my mind's eye, I can see, the color red and picture it in my mind. Looking on our STCC website, I was just kind of doing a little searching this morning. There's some nice description, with the Carberry Gallery. It says picture of gallery with name in gold letters. And just to have that little extra touch there is really nice. Sometimes they'll describe the picture, image of student holding a book, reading a book or sitting on a sofa reading a book or something. It's nice to have to kind of strike that balance between not too much, but just enough so that you can really get a sense of what you're looking at.
Thank you, Nancy. And from the other group, can you share your experiences of writing alternative text? I believe it was Jamie, Nancy Ward, and Kyle.
Well, I jumped in there and they were already superstars starting. So
I will say it was tricky to do the cartoon, that involved a lot of text.
Yeah, the more complex the image, the trickier it's going to get.
Yeah.
And I think, we talked about, Marisha and I are our partner, like we are work partners. So, we bounce this off all the time. And we do have these conversations about, like I tell people I use Bitmojis in my class and I would make these elaborate like details, but then I was like, is that necessary? And it's really helpful. Like when I walked in there, Jamie and Nancy had, humpback whale breaching. And I was like, do people know what breaching means? And does breaching mean coming out of the water? Do they ever come out of anything else? That sounds really weird, like lava. Like, I don't know, but that it's one of those things where that doesn't necessarily mean their description is wrong. It's that it's the inquiry to figure out if that's the best ability to describe it.
Well, and that's where context matters, right? Because if you're talking to a group of marine biologists, you may use one type of description. If you're talking to middle school students, the description may be very different, even if in both cases you're teaching science.
Right.
Well, thank you, everyone. Oh, yeah, Jamie, go ahead.
It's also interesting to think about the difference between writing a caption and writing alt text. With the two things that came up for me thinking about these two images. You know, if you're writing a caption, for example, for a middle school textbook, and you're wanting students for whatever reason to understand what breaching is, then you might use that term next to the image so students associate the term with the image. But if you're writing alt text, you're doing something for quite a different purpose, right?
Right. So you may want to say that, you know, it's jumping over its back in the process of breaching or something like that. Like, does it matter that it's breaching backwards as opposed to jumping? I'm not actually sure if breaching is always backwards. Does it matter how high out of the water the whale is?
And then the other one was with the cartoon. You know, the joke in the cartoon really has to do with visual conventions of cartooning. And it's an example where it's one image where describing what's happening in the image, like you start to bump up against the limits of what you could do with that. And thinking about some of the images I use with my students, sometimes I use like street photography to teach close reading. Sometimes we look at historical maps. So if we're looking like at a historical map of Springfield, there's no way you can really describe the things that we're looking at when we're looking at that map in alt text, because you would have like several thousand word document, you know, like and so it makes me think about the limits of that translatability.
Right. I remember having a conversation about maps. And so then you're really getting at what is the important information? Is it trade routes? Is it that the border is a mountain range or a river? Like, because you can't put all of the information that's in a map in the alt text.
Right. But if the purpose of the class exercise is to have the students think about what is the important information that they're finding in it, then like that becomes really hard to translate.
And sometimes, so one of I didn't include it in this presentation, but I had like city ley lines to talk about, you know, the different places of it. And what I did was I found the different like highway, or like, you know, electrical piping, all of these things. And I was sitting there being like, if I were going to have a more distinct or discrete conversation, I would use the bigger picture to explain that this is what this looks like as a whole on a macro level. And then I would probably have to zoom in and alter the image to zoom in on the specifics that I would be doing. So that just brings up again, it's a lot about context in this case, because I was trying to make a general concept that you'd apply all these things on it. How do you have a conversation when you start applying a whole bunch of maps onto a giant city? That's just going to overwhelm people. So I would have had to say something on a macro level. This image represents all of the XYZ, and then have individual images zoomed in, broken down, explained, and that there might not be a one fits all image for something you're trying to relay. And if it gets too complicated, that's the pause of maybe this needs to be broken down a little bit more, because if I can't explain it for alt text for simplicity, it might be too complex of an image that needs to actually have more components to it. So just to kind of like piggyback on that, that was something that I thought of for this presentation. Was I was like, oh, I'm going to do this thing and this is the example. And I was like, this got way complicated.
So I love the conversation, but I am going to go to our next section of our presentation so that we can get through just a little bit more content and get a little bit into the nitty-gritty of image creation. So today we're using Google Slides as our tool for image creation. So just a really quick summary of how we do this. So if we're in our Google and we go to the waffle in the upper right, then that gives us the menu of all the Google tools, and there we can select Google Slides. When I select Google Slides, I see all the past presentations that I've watched or created, and I can select to create a blank presentation. And really all this does is it gives me a canvas to work on. It gives me space to create whatever I want to do. And I like working in Google Slides for more graphical things rather than Google Docs, because moving pieces around is easier. You're not restricted by the lines of a document. So I'm just going to close the themes menu. I don't need that right now. And in the layout menu, I'm actually going to select blank, so I don't have the placeholders for titles and subtitles. I don't want those for today. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a choice of what format of canvas do I want. Do I want the rectangle kind of as our traditional slide? Do I want it to be vertical rather than horizontal? Do I want a square? So I can go to the File menu and I can go to Page Setup. And here the default is widescreen, where the aspect ratio is 16:9. But I can actually go to Custom. And in Custom, I can select any dimensions that I want in inches, centimeters, points, or pixels. So if I know that the image that I'm going to create is in a printed format, would be like a logo that's 4 inches by 4 inches, I can go ahead and select that. And then going back to what Kyle was saying in terms of resolution, it's going to have appropriate resolution for that print size. If I'm going to be printing it much larger, then I want to have a larger canvas so that I don't lose resolution when I blow it up. So I'm going to select 4 by 4 inches and I'm going to select Apply. So now I have a square box on my screen, which if exported and then added to another document would be about 4 by 4 inches. Okay, so I have my canvas, and now I'm going to add an image to my canvas. So this would be a situation where I had an image and then I wanted to enhance it in some way. So maybe I'm creating a logo where then I want to add some text to my image. So I'm going to go to the Insert menu, and I'm going to select Image, and I'm going to select Upload from Computer. I also have options here to upload from Drive, upload from Photos, use the camera. So if you wanted your lovely face, you could take a webcam photo. You can also search the web right here, but when you search the web here, you don't have all those tools that Kyle talked about in terms of looking for Creative Commons. So it's really recommended to do your search, save what you want to do to your computer, and then upload it into your Google Slides. So upload from computer, and I'm going to find an image of Garvey Hall that I've previously downloaded. I'm going to select Open. And so now I have my image canvas with my image of Garvey Hall overlaid on it. And I can move it around. I can grab the corners. I can make it bigger or smaller. So I have a lot of flexibility in terms of what I want to do with this image. And I can also add text. So I can use the text box and I can stretch my text box over my image and I can just type text. So I can say Garvey Hall. Now, if we look at the top in my menu, we will see that my font size is actually a 9-point font. Because remember, my canvas here is only a 4x4 inch canvas. It's really small. Even for a logo, you're not going to want to have a 9-point font. That is going to be way too small for anyone to read. So you really want to stick to 12 points as your minimum and then work your way up from there depending on where your image is going to be presented and how you're going to present it. So I can highlight my text and I can change it to a larger font size and go from there to create my image. So I keep going back and forth and saying image in terms of everything that's on my screen and then the image that I add to my image. So I'm creating one product that together is going to be a single image that's going to incorporate the text that I add and the images that I pull in. I also have tools within Google Slides if I want to add additional shapes, lines, that sort of thing. So I have the shapes tool where I can add arrows. So for example, if I wanted to create an image that pointed out the front door of Garvey Hall. Yeah, Kyle, go ahead.
I was gonna say, so from a graphic design standpoint, we call the white box the artboard. So that is what you're placing things onto that ultimately will be formatted into an image format itself. But the artboard is where we're placing everything onto, which can include images. If that language is a little more helpful.
Thank you. Yes, I kept calling it the canvas. I think Photoshop calls it canvas, but artboard. Good. I will adopt that. All right. So I have some text. I have some images on my artboard. I can add an arrow if I want. So now I have an arrow that I can overlay over my Garvey Hall image. And so I can go ahead and keep building out my document. Now, this is a good moment to pause and determine how I'm going to share the image after it's been created. So I'm going to go back to my slides and talk about the sharing of images. So in sharing my images, I have two kind of big buckets of how my image might be shared. I might share it as a PDF using a tool called Grackle, and that would be for creating a document, so creating a flyer, creating a meme, creating a graph, where you're going to be attaching it as a document. So you might attach it as an email, you might send it to the print office. You're creating a document with it. When you create a PDF, you want that PDF to be accessible, and Grackle is going to help you maintain the accessibility. So if I go back to my image, I want to make sure that I have included all the accessibility features that are available to me. So I want to add alternative text. So I have my image of Garvey Hall. I'm going to right click on it, select alt text, and this is where I can add my alternative text with all of our awesome alt text writing skills that we have developed. So what do I want people to know? Maybe I want to know that Garvey Hall is a brick building with white pillars and gold writing. Maybe I want to know that the name of Garvey Hall is placed right in the middle of that column entryway. So this is where I would enter my alternative text. So I might say Garvey Hall with white pillars. Okay, so if I add that alternative text and I export it using Grackle to a PDF, the alternative text will come with my image into the PDF document. The other way that I may share my image is I may download it as a PNG or a JPEG. When I do that, it essentially takes everything that is in my, Kyle, I've blanked on the word. My canvas.
Your artboard.
My artboard, thank you. So if I download it as a PNG or a JPEG, it's going to take my artboard and it's going to collapse everything down. So any alternative text that was added is no longer going to be part of the document. The text is no longer going to be separate from the other elements. So the arrow is going to be part of the image over which it is overlaid. So with downloading as a PNG or a JPEG, that would be where I create a logo, a graphic, a drawing, a photo that I then incorporate into a different document. So I may take that logo and I may put it into an email. I may create a banner that I add to a website. I may create a artistic photo that I then share as part of a larger compilation. So in those instances, when I'm exporting my artboard as a PNG or a JPEG, I'm going to need to remember that later on, when I use my artboard, then I'm going to go in and I'm going to add alt text for all of the components, including the text and the arrow and the image that are all part of the same artboard. So if I go back to my slide, I can go to File and I can go to Download. And here I have the different file format types. So the ones that are most frequently going to be used for images are JPEG or PNG, depending on whether you're creating something that is more of a photo or more of a graphic, like a logo. Okay, so, and Kyle, thank you for reminding us that Grackle is a tool that is licensed for all faculty, students, and staff at STIC, so anybody can use it. And let me just do a really quick demo of Grackle as well, so doing the export using Grackle. So Grackle lives under the extensions menu. So if we click on extensions and then select Grackle Slides and select Launch, it's going to run for a little bit. And so Grackle actually does two things. It checks my document for accessibility. So if you forgot to add alt text, it's going to remind you to do that. But then it also has the export to PDF option that's right there. And that is the best way to get an accessible PDF from any of your Google products. Okay, we're at 329. I will take that as a win. We had one more poll. I'm going to pause with launching that poll, and I'm just going to share a few things with you. And if you want to stick around for the poll, great. If you need to head out, that is totally okay as well. So first thing I'm going to share with you is our website that houses all the slides that we showed you today. It's also going to house our recording from today after it's processed. It has step-by-step instructions on a lot of what we're talking about, and we're going to keep building out those instructions to add more detail to them. So you can come back to this page if you need any reminders of anything that we talked about today. So I'm putting that link in the chat. And I'm also going to put a quick survey in the chat. So that is the second link for Google Forms. So if you could let us know, how did this go for you? Do you need further follow-up support? Do you want to sit side by side with one of us and create some images? We're always happy to do that. So that's the second link that I just added. And at this point, I will go ahead, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I will launch the poll. And if you have a couple more minutes, we can talk about that. So our second poll for today, here it is. So it's about image sharing. And it has a question about writing alt text, about sharing images, and your comfort level with where we got today. And I think we all just want Jamie's dog.
That'd be like the happiest moment right now.
So you're welcome to come on the mic if you have any lasting questions. If you have a chance to answer the poll, go ahead and do that. Let us know how we're doing. And please complete the survey. And we will email the recording and all the links to everyone who was here as well. So if you didn't write down all those links, then you will get them in an email too.
On potentially the next school day.
Which may or may not be tomorrow. On that note, I'm going to stop the recording.